Hello everyone. In today's video, you'll learn the story of Jonathan Miller, an American businessman who died for a few minutes and came back with a shocking revelation from Jesus. Not all tithes are accepted in heaven. What he saw on the other side will shake your beliefs about faith and offerings. Like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and comment below which city you're watching from. Now get ready, because this experience will shake you up inside. My name is Jonathan Miller. I have 59 years old. I am a businessman, and I have lived my entire life in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in the church, literally. My parents were respected leaders, the kind people greet with reverence in the hallways of the congregation. At age 12, I was already helping to organize services. At 20, I was already giving lectures on prosperity. At 40, my name was among the largest donors in my denomination. In 2022 alone, I donated more than $300,000. They called me God's banker. I said I didn't care about the praise, but I loved it. Honestly, I thought I had credit with heaven, that I was buying blessings with the tithe. When my daughter got sick, I tripled my offerings. When my business was in crisis, I did financial sacrifice campaigns. One pastor even said, "Jonathan, God never forgets a faithful tither." And I believed him. But I was deeply mistaken. The truth found me at the worst possible time. It was one morning in my car, returning from yet another service where I left a generous check on the altar. I parked in front of the coffee shop where I usually have my coffee. Everything was normal until my vision went black. My chest burned, as if it had been pierced by a red-hot iron. The steering wheel disappeared from my hand. The breath left my lungs. I felt like I was there, inside the car, with the Bible on the passenger seat and his pocket empty from so much giving. What happened next is why you're hearing this now. Because what I saw, they didn't give it to me in Sunday school. And what I heard from Jesus broke my soul. Prepare yourself. Because the tithe that I thought was saving me was exactly what was condemning me. I didn't feel my heart stop. Too heard. It was as if a door had been violently ripped open inside my chest. For a few seconds, everything was silent. No pain, no sound, just an absolute emptiness. And then, as if I had been pulled by an invisible whirlpool, I felt my body sinking but my consciousness rising. The first thing I noticed was the frozen time. My body was still there, slumped in the car seat, the door open, my legs dangling. But I was no longer there. I saw myself from above, and for the first time in my life, I had no control over anything. I tried to scream, but my mouth was gone. I tried to move my arms, but there were no arms. It was as if I was made of nothing but thoughts and fear, a different kind of fear. It wasn't fear of death. It was fear of discovering that all my life I had believed a lie. It was then that the environment around me changed drastically. From an ordinary parking lot, I was transported, not walking, not floating, but simply being, to a place that seemed to be made of golden smoke, bright light, and a total absence of human sounds. But there was something, someone, a presence that crushed me even without touching me. The atmosphere was dense, charged with truth, but not that truth that comforts. It was a truth that tears, which confronts, which reveals. And then the voice came. It was not an ordinary voice. It did not ring in the ears. She invaded from within. Each word reverberated in my spirit like thunder inside an empty temple. "Jonathan, you gave so much, but you withheld everything I really wanted." Those words were like knives without a handle. I wanted to ask, "What?" But before I could form the thought, a living wall of light opened before me, and that wall was like a mirror of the soul. In it, I began to see scenes of me, handing out checks with fake smiles, shaking hands with pastors with looks of vanity, helping people but looking around to make sure they were seeing me, praying, but only repeating pretty phrases to maintain the image of being spiritual. I saw my campaigns of faith and sacrifice that were actually spiritual blackmail. I saw my arrogance hidden behind the clothes of a believer. I saw my faith being treated like investment and the tithe as return guarantee. And then the voice said something that made me cry, even without eyes. You made my altar a transaction, a contract, a currency, but I was never for sale. At that time, I broke myself. There was no ground, but I wanted to fall. There was no body, but I felt as if every part of who I was collapsing in shame. What came next was even worse, because Jesus showed me what happens with offerings that don't come from the heart. Do you want to see what I saw? I was there before that indescribable presence, feeling naked without being naked, ashamed without having been accused. And then, before me, the wall of light has changed. From reflection, it became a window. And what I saw through it, it was the most brutal shock of my spiritual life. It was as if I were looking up at heaven, but not a heaven of fluffy clouds and angels playing harps. No, it was a sacred place, living, breathing glory. But there, right before the heavenly altar, I saw something repulsive. Piles and piles of envelopes floated in the air. There were letters, checks, bills, all stamped with phrases like purpose, faith campaign, miracle seed. But none of them shone. None of them went up. None of them were accepted. They hovered like suspended garbage, waiting for something that would never come. And then Jesus spoke, and it wasn't a parable. It was a verdict. These are the offerings that did not go up. They were given with the hands but without the heart. I wanted to look the other way. I didn't want to see, but there, no one looks away. No one runs away from the truth. I saw people I knew. I saw envelopes with my name on them. They were there, heavy, dark, rejected. I tried to argue. I wanted to say, but I gave it with faith. But the answer came before the thought. I gave in fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of not getting it back. Fear of not being seen as faithful. That one destroyed me. I spent my life saying that I gave out of love, that tithing was a privilege, that sowing was an honor. But the naked truth, which only that place could reveal, was that what I called faith was anxiety disguised as spirituality. And Jesus continued, many have turned tithing into an amulet, a spiritual insurance, a silent contract. I give, you protect me. But the kingdom does not work by exchange. It works by surrender. That word, surrender, echoed like a hammer on stone. I had never given up. Investi, you negotiation. You commit, but I never gave up. I never gave in, without expecting anything in return. It was then that the scene changed once again. I saw services, altars full of envelopes. Pastors were emotional. People were crying while offering. But above all this, I saw the hearts behind the hands. Some shone, others were dark caves of pride, bargaining, and fear. And Jesus said, not every altar is mine, not every offering is incense, and not every tithe reaches the throne. This sentence went through me with such force that, even there, outside of my body, I felt as if my spirit was bleeding. I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to tear up every envelope, every campaign, every vote made for convenience. But it was too late. I could no longer hide. I had used God's name as an investment, brand. And the worst part, I wasn't the only one. Want to know what I saw next? Because what was shown to me afterwards involves well-known people, pastors, and even miracles, faked. The scene before me seemed impossible. I was seeing with the eyes of the Spirit what would never be shown from a Sunday pulpit. It was as if the veils were falling one by one and the hidden truth of the modern church was revealed without censorship, without mercy, without makeup. I saw a cult. It was one of those big events with a brightly lit stage, a standing crowd, loud music, and an atmosphere charged with emotion. The pastor, a familiar, even famous face, one of those who appears at international conferences, held a golden microphone, and next to him was a table full of envelopes with prophetic tithes, as he called them. People were crying. Many knelt down to offer their offerings. Cameras broadcast live to the world. They shouted, "Hallelujah, glory, today is my day of victory." But there, outside the earthly dimension, I saw the invisible. I saw the angels moving away. I saw the sky in silence. I saw the altar as afakad, and behind, what was supposed to be holy turned into a spiritual market. Jesus was beside me. His presence was strong, but different from what I expected. There was no anger, but there was no joy. It was a silent pain, a lament of someone who loves and sees their children playing with what is sacred. They exchange me for promises. They use my name to activate blessings they themselves created. They seek me with adulterated intentions. His words fell like silent thunder, and then he pointed. I saw a man being healed at the altar. He threw his cane up in the air, ran, and cried. The church burst into applause. But there, in the spiritual dimension, there was no cure. I saw a laughing demon hidden behind the stage. It was a staged cure, a hoax created to increase offers. Jesus looked at me, and it was as if I heard his thoughts. Where there is hunger for power, there is room for deception. I was shaking. Inside. Outside. All over. I wanted to scream. Lord, why don't you stop this? But before my indignation could take shape, he replied firmly, because they don't want the truth. They want results. They don't come to me to be transformed, but to be promoted. I wanted to close my eyes, but that was not possible. I was forced to see everything you never wanted to see. People giving away cars, selling houses, getting into debt to fulfill their vows, all in the name of a faith that promised a return, and the saddest part, thought they were pleasing God. I saw how the offers went up, or didn't go up. I saw envelopes fly toward the light and vanish like smoke. Others, however, fell like stones straight to the spiritual ground without even being noticed by the sky. Jesus then spoke once more. They learned to use tithing as a key, but they forgot that the kingdom opens with surrender. At that moment, I understood that what I thought was spirituality was just religion packaged to sell, and the tithe, a sacred symbol that had been prostituted by ambition. But what shocked me the most was what I saw about myself. There, in that place where nothing is hidden and all masks fall, Jesus showed me something that devastated me more than any previous vision, the image I had of myself, and who I really was in the eyes of heaven. I thought I had seen the worst. The rejected offerings, the staged miracles, the corrupted intentions. But when he turned his eyes upon me, not as a judge, but as truth incarnate, I collapsed. The wall of light moved again, now revealing my own private cults, not the public ones, with clapping and microphones, but the secret ones, those moments when I was alone with God, or thought I was. I saw scenes of myself praying at dawn, crying, fasting, making vows. But around those images, there was a sound that hurt more than any words, the sound of my own hidden thoughts. Lord, look at what I have done. Look at how much I have given. Now you need to answer me. Jesus just looked, in silence. But inside me, an old wound opened. All those times I handed out stuffed envelopes expecting a blessing the next day. All the campaigns I did, not out of love, but out of desperation. All the praises I sang with my mind stuck on bills to pay. Everything was exposed. I was not a faithful tither. I was a faith investor. And then he said something that seemed to rip my soul from the inside out. Jonathan, your faithfulness was not to me. It was to the blessing. It was like falling into an abyss of consciousness. I did not serve God. I served the idea of a God who owed me something. All my obedience was bargaining. All my generosity was spiritual blackmail disguised as zeal. That moment, Jesus approached. Its light was no longer sharp, it was warm like a purifying fire. And then he said in a voice that penetrated what I didn't even know existed within me, "You never trusted me. You trusted the system, the routine, the religion, but never me. I cried, not with tears because I had no eyes, but with spirit. It was a dry, deep, desperate cry, because there I realized that everything I thought I was doing for love was for fear of losing control. You said I was the Lord, but you always wanted to be the owner of the promise. Those words destroyed my castle of faith built on sand. There was nothing left to defend. I was naked, undressed, unmasked. And it was then that Jesus told me something that would forever change my view on tithing. You gave what you could see, but you withheld what I wanted most. I was shaking. If I had a body, I would be in tears. But there, in the spiritual world, pain doesn't need eyes, nor tears. She simply, and it occupies everything. And at that moment, after hearing from Jesus that I had given what I could see, but withheld what he really wanted, a holy silence took over the atmosphere. The light around it pulsed as if it were alive. And it was then that he said, "You gave me notes, Manin, but you never gave me the invisible treasure." I didn't understand right away, and he, like a patient teacher, began to show me. I saw scenes from my childhood, of the boy who prayed kneeling beside his bed, before he knew what tithing was, before he knew what theology was, before the performance there was purity. I saw my teenage years, when I hid in the church bathroom to cry, afraid of not being good enough. I saw when I prayed, alone saying, "God, I just want to please you." And then I saw like a dry cut when everything became a system, when my heart was exchanged for spiritual goals. Jesus said, "What I expected from you was your heart without a mask, your adoration without calculation, your faith without a contract." I understood. The treasure that heaven awaited it was, not the tithe. It was the sincere delivery, that place inside me that surrendered without demanding guarantees, that adored without expecting anything in return, that gave without expecting recognition, that loved unconditionally. And then he said, "You offered with numbers, but held back your brokenness." It was like being crushed by glory and truth at the same time. I thought tithing was protection, that generosity was spiritual insurance, that giving more was the key to blessing. But in that moment, I realized that God is not impressed by the value of the hands, but rather with the state of the heart. And it was then that Jesus asked me a question. "Jonathan, if I gave you nothing else, would you still worship me?" I didn't know how to answer. There, exposed before the bright light, I realized I was not prepared to love God without benefits. And that hurt more than any conviction. Most people don't deliver what I desire most. It's not gold, it's a broken heart, repentance, the unvarnished truth. It was at this moment that a new vision was shown to me, something that will leave you breathless. Jesus took me to a place where the tithers really faithful are received, and what I saw it is not what religion teaches. The light began to move, as if obeying a silent order from the sky itself. And then the environment has completely changed. I was taken to a place that I cannot explain in human words. It was simple, but loaded with a majesty that not even 1,000 cathedrals together could reproduce. I saw a garden, but not like the ones here. Every leaf, every flower, every particle of light there seemed alive, conscious, pulsating in continuous adoration. It was as if everything in that place I knew I belonged to God, and was happy to be just a share. Jesus said to me, "Here I receive the offerings that rise like perfume. Here are stored the invisible seeds, those that were planted with pain but with truth." And then I saw something that made my spirit tremble. I saw people, the faces of ordinary people, simple women, humble men, even children, no famous people, none that I had seen on stage. They were there, standing, like columns of soft light, dresses of sincerity, and at his feet, there was something extraordinary. Golden. Fragments floated around them. Jesus revealed to me, "These are the bids that went up." It wasn't gold. It wasn't checks. They were memories, feelings, motivations. These were moments of surrender made anonymously, in silence, without an audience. No camera, no likes. I saw a woman who handed over her last coin smiling, even though she didn't know how she would feed her children the next day. But her heart was surrendered, not desperate. I saw a young man who offered only $1, but he did so with tears of gratitude, not because he wanted blessings, but because he recognized that had already received everything in Christ. And Jesus looked at me with the most serene eyes I have ever seen and said, "They never tried to buy me. They just wanted to love me." My chest hurt, because there, in the place where the true offerings are kept, you didn't see me. There was no fragment of me there. None of my campaigns, my generous checks, my votes at expensive conferences. Nothing. You gave a lot, Jonathan, but almost everything was exchange. What is love goes up. What is interest weighs down. I couldn't answer, but Jesus knew. The glory of that place was not made of gold or power. It was made of surrendered hearts, people who preferred to be faithful in pain than rich in appearance. People who gave not because they expected a miracle, but because it was already a miracle to be alive. And then he asked me the question that would change everything. Do you want to learn how to truly offer? I didn't hesitate. Yes, Lord, teach me, because now I know that I know nothing. And that's when he took me to the darkest place of my journey, a place where no one wants to enter, but everyone must pass through. I answered yes to Jesus, not knowing what it would cost me. Little did I know that this yes would lead me to most feared place of my entire spiritual existence. It was as if the sky closed in for an instant, and the light around it drew in like a held breath. And then, without warning, I was thrown into a dark place. It wasn't hell, but it wasn't heaven either. It was what Jesus called the valley where intentions are judged. Everything there was gray, arid. There were no demons, no fire, but there was something worse. The silence of God mixed with the weight of everything we hide even from ourselves. But what are you inside takes shape before you, and what I saw crushed me. Facing me, a figure appeared. It was me, but not the Jonathan from the photos, the services, the conferences. It was a Jonathan deformed, swollen with pride, overflowing with vanity, with eyes of anxiety and hands shaking with control. He held a Bible, but his lips were stained with murmurs. In his shirt pocket, several envelopes, all marked with phrases like, "To secure my blessing, to protect my family, to unlock promises." Jesus said, "This is the version of you that lived disguised as faith." I cried, I screamed, but there was no echo, because there is no audience, there are no excuses, there is no cult, there is only raw truth. I tried to run away from that, our image of myself, but every time I ran, she came back in front of me. And that's when I understood that valley is not a prison, it's surgery. That's where the sky cut out anything that prevents the offer from being sincere. Jesus spoke with a firm but compassionate voice. Most of those who give today have this spiritual appearance, distorted by unconfessed intentions. They think they are giving to me, but they are trying to pay for a fear they have never faced. That phrase stuck with me. How many times have I offered out of fear of illness? For fear of the crisis? For fear of appearing unfaithful? I called it faith, but it was panic disguised as spirituality. And then, that corrupted version of me began to melt, like wax before the fire. Meanwhile, Jesus said, "You can only deliver something pure when you are willing to let what is false die." I fell. Even without a body, I prostrated myself. There, in the spiritual dust of truth, I said in thought, "Lord, I don't want to pay you anymore. I want to love you. Teach me to be real." And he answered, So now, I can give you what you always wanted but never deserved. There, kneeling in the dust of my soul, having seen my pride melt before the living truth, I prepared myself for rejection. Part of me thought Jesus would say, "Now you've seen it, now go away." But it was precisely at that moment, when I was more broken, more stripped of any argument, that he approached with a look that no human being could hold. "Jonathan, now you are ready, not to give, but to know me." These words passed through me like liquid light. And then, he held something out to me. It was not an object. It was like a floating flame, soft, blue, alive, throbbing. As soon as it touched my spirit, I knew what it was. Not by logic, but by revelation, era grace. But not the grace I preached in Bible studies, not that memorized theological definition, unmerited favor. Era living grace, presence of God in pure form, acceptance not by merit, but by surrender. Jesus said to me, "This no tithe can buy, no campaign can activate, no human altar can release. It is only born when the heart surrenders without reservation." At that moment, Seconds was filled with a love that doesn't charge, that doesn't negotiate, that doesn't depend on performance. For the first time in my life, Ty didn't feel like I had to prove anything to God. I just existed before him. And that was enough. I felt layers of religiosity taking off from me like old shells. All the rehearsed speech, all the fear of making mistakes, all the desire to be seen as a man of faith. It was all ripped away. And in return I received something that no amount of money can buy: peace with God. Jesus continued, "Heaven does not recognize numbers. Heaven recognizes truth." And then, as if opening a portal before me, he showed me my life, starting over. I saw myself returning to the world of the living, but with new eyes. I saw my hands holding envelopes, but this time, no rush. I saw my heart offering with tears, but not out of fear or exchange, out of gratitude. You didn't come back to collect more. You came back to free others who, like you, are still trapped in a gospel of exchange. Those words were a call, a mission, a sending. I knew that if I went back, nothing would be the same again. And then Jesus spoke one last time before I left that place. "I don't want your tithe. I want your whole heart. The tithe will be a consequence, not currency." It was then that everything began to get dark. But unlike the first time, there was no fear. There was a mission. And when I opened my eyes in the hospital, the world was the same. But I was no longer that man. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.